All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Continuous Integration, Continuous Delivery, Continuous Security. I have a few things to go over before we get started. So one, this is a CloudBees CodeShip webinar that we are doing in part with our partner Snyk. This is part of the CloudBees Innovator Program. We've chosen to do this because we see a lot of value in Snyk's product and company culture and how they're helping developers everywhere. And it's something that we want to promote as it's right in line with our own values. So I'm excited for you to all hear from them today. We are recording this. If you need to leave at any point during this, we'll be getting the recording later. And if you have any colleagues who are unable to join, they'll be able to hear the recording later as well. We also can take questions. We're going to have time at the end for questions and answers. So please, as soon as you think of anything, put it right into that question panel. Even if you think maybe we'll answer it later on, it's always good just to know what people are looking to know. On top of that, at the very end, when I close this out, a very brief survey will come up just asking what you thought and what you'd like to learn more about in the future. For now, I'd like to get started with a couple of poll questions for everyone, just to kind of gauge where the audience is. So I'm going to pull in that first one up right now. At what point in the software development lifecycle do you consider security? You could choose one of the following between while writing code, during code review or before the code is merged, before code is deployed. I don't actively consider security during my development, and someone else on my team is responsible for doing that. We're getting a good amount of votes in. I'm going to give this maybe 10 or so more seconds to let everyone continue to get these in. And I'm pretty impressed with the spread so far, I'd like to say. I think this is going to be very illuminating once we see it. So let's say maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, just to show everyone what we just saw, we're at 32% while writing code, 27% during code review or before the code is merged, 15% before code is deployed, 8% I don't actively consider security during my development, and 18% someone else on my team is responsible for doing that. All right, let's move on to the next one here. How often do you upgrade your open source dependencies? Now, it's between all of my dependencies are pinned and I upgrade infrequently. I upgrade my non-pinned dependencies passively. Upgrading dependencies is an ongoing effort done monthly. Case by case, usually because of a new feature or similar, or I upgrade frequently to stay on top of vulnerable security. This is another where so far I'm really liking the results. And pretty soon, I'm going to be closing this up. Let's say 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, show the results here. 22%, all of my dependencies are pinned and I upgrade infrequently. 9%, I upgrade my non-pinned dependencies passively. 3%, upgrading dependencies is an ongoing effort done monthly. 33%, case by case, usually because the new feature is similar, and also 33%, I upgrade frequently to be on top of vulnerable security. All right, one more for us here. This one you can choose as many as you want that fit. What would make you more interested in security? Good resources for beginners, tools that fit into my existing workflow, a community of security-minded folks with whom I can chat, a more thorough understanding of the business value, and something else that I will mention or tweet to one of our presenters here at Haley Denby. Wow, votes coming in real quick for this one, like that. Another pretty good spread. So let's give this another maybe 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I will say, presenter Haley came up with this, and apparently she pretty much covered everything. So we got a lot of good resources for beginners, tools that fit in my existing workflow, community of security-minded folks with whom I can chat, more thorough understanding. You can see the percentages all here. Not really much else coming up. If you do think of anything else as we go, remember you put it right into the question panel. We'll talk about it at the end. For now, I'd like to move on and I'd like to introduce our presenters. So we're going to be hearing from CloudBees CodeShip, developer support engineer, Joe Seward, and we're going to be hearing from Snyk, a developer advocate, Haley Denbraver. And I'd like to pass it right over to our speakers. So why don't we get started, guys?
Thanks so much, Max. I hope everyone can hear me. I think so. Joe, are you there?
I'm here. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming today to this webinar. and I'm really excited to talk with you about continuous integration, continuous delivery, and what continuous security might look like. And I just wanted to thank CloudBees CodeShip for having me, and I'm really excited to show you some things today. So let's kick it off. So first, I wanted to promote DevOps World and Jenkins World. And CloudBees has these events going on, and we at Snyk are also really excited for them. My boss is going to be speaking at the San Francisco conference at the very least, I think. And so we hope to see you there. And let's see, it's August 12th through 15th in San Francisco, and in December in Lisbon, Portugal. So a little bit about me. Like Max said, my name's Haley Denbraver, and you can tweet at me at HaleyDenB on Twitter. And I'm a developer advocate at Snyk. And at Snyk, we live, breathe, sleep, eat security. It's our bread and butter. It's what we do all day. And so we've picked this intimidating guard dog for our logo, but to kind of give you an idea of what my job is at the company, I like to show this picture of a golden retriever, because my job is to be friendly and approachable and eager to help you out. So if there's ever any questions you have about Snyk or about security in general, or just want to talk to Snyk, you can always tweet at me at HaleyDenB on Twitter, and I'd love to hear from you. All right, so just to give you an idea of what our agenda is today, I'm going to open by talking about open source security kind of in a general way and give you an introduction to Snyk. And then we're going to talk a little bit about shifting security left. After that, we're going to do a CodeShip demo, and that'll be really fun. And finally, we'll review some of the topics we've covered, and then I will open it up to questions, and we'll maybe discuss some of the results of that poll and resources that Snyk has for you to help you out with some of those things that we asked you questions for. So this link will show you, this link will send you to the sign up for Snyk, and you can get an account here. And in order to use some of the tools I'm going to show you, it's necessary to sign up. So I just want to make sure you all had that so you could go home and try some things out. So to kick it off, let's talk Snyk and let's talk security. Now, our goal is to help you find and fix vulnerabilities in your open source dependencies. And I'm going to show you a chart that'll kind of illustrate why that's our goal. And here's the chart. This big orange circle is going to represent your application, and it's going to represent all the code that is in your application. However, only a tiny bit of that is actually the code that you personally write. So this is everything proprietary to you. This is everything in your repository on GitHub or GitLab, this little pink dot, right? And the rest of this orange circle represents your open source dependencies. And that each of these dependencies, it's a security risk. And because there's so much more surface area on your open source dependencies versus the code that you actually write, that means that if someone's going to break in, they're more likely to break in this big orange circle than the little pink circle. And we need to consider each dependency kind of independently and get a sense of what security risks might be involved. And the first question to ask is, do you know which dependencies you have? And you may think you do, but you may not know all of them. And that's because when you install a dependency, often that dependency will install more dependencies. And so you could have a library in your application code that you never consciously put there, but it presents a risk potentially to you. And so you're going to want to know what you're working with, right? And Snyk has tools that will help you see your dependency tree and be able to locate all of those libraries. And then once you know what you're working with, you want to ask, do I know for every single dependency if the developers who wrote it have any security expertise? And the answer is often, I don't know, right? Some libraries are going to be more explicit about what security things that they have done for their projects, but some won't, and it's kind of a big question mark. And another big question mark is, do you know for every dependency if it underwent any security testing? And again, some projects might be fairly open about this, and others, like, you don't necessarily know. And when you don't know, it's probably good to assume that that not much was done. And finally, for every single dependency, are there known vulnerabilities? And this is actually a fairly big problem. You know, open source is awesome because you're able to reuse code, and you can get things up and running really quickly, and you can inspect the code, see what it's doing, all these different things. But it means that bad actors can do that as well. And so people will find vulnerabilities. Some will exploit them, but others will, you know, try to get it rectified. But once the vulnerability is known, even if that person that found it did the right thing by the community, now others can potentially exploit the vulnerability before everybody has upgraded, that kind of thing. So we want to know, are there known vulnerabilities in the packages that we use? Now, open source is written by people, and you know, people, they're not perfect, and no code is perfect, right? And people don't write perfect code. And a lot of them are volunteers. So I don't mean to throw any shade on maintainers. What they do is awesome for the community, and I'm just trying to look at this from what can I as an individual developer do to use open source in the safest way possible. And that, you know, the first step to that is admitting that, like, there probably are problems out there, right? And secondly, open source is written by people, but really most of them are going to be strangers, right? And sometimes strangers are friends you haven't met yet, but sometimes strangers are, you know, not trustworthy, and there's potential for a problem to be there as well. And Snyk loves open source, and you know, I don't offer these criticisms to deter you from using it or to throw shade on anyone maintaining projects. it's just, we want to be building amazing things, and we want to be proactive about our security instead of reactive. And that's the goal. The goal is, when I'm looking at the entirety of this code, not just the little piece I wrote, but the whole big orange circle, I want to feel fairly confident that I've done my part in making sure it's secure. And that includes looking at my own code, but also deliberately thinking about the dependencies. And this is actually, it's been a problem. If you all have heard about the Equifax breach, that was through a vulnerability in an open source package. And, you know, Equifax got a lot of press about this because they're a big name, and the data that they handle is financial, and therefore it was a big impact, right? But there were thousands of orgs that had this problem. And what we really want to do is to shrink the time between when a vulnerability is known and when it is either patched or when you update to a version that won't have that vulnerability, right? Like we don't want you out of date, because if you're out of date, that's low-hanging fruit to malicious actors. And this goes back to the malicious actors could be maintainers themselves. This slide shows an example of the event stream situation that happened late last year. There was a good maintainer who had kind of informally retired his project, and he didn't want to work on it so much anymore, but he turned the keys over to someone who had bad intentions, and an exploit was purposely put in the system. So this is just about covering your bases, whether there are issues out there from malice or just from us being people and not perfect. And the thing about security is that we really want to see developers owning security to a larger degree than they tend to right now. I was actually really encouraged by the results of the poll. It sounds like the majority of you are at least doing some thinking about security, which is possibly part of the reason you're here. And Snyk wants to help you continue to do this, help you adopt a security mindset by building tools that will meet you where you are, right? And so this can be, we want to integrate with the products that you use. So this is part of the partnership with CodeShip, but we also have tools throughout the software development lifecycle, including things like integrations with some IDEs. We have a really useful CLI tool. We integrate with a number of source control managers. So we have GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, etc. And we're trying to meet you where you are. And this means shifting security left, which is a little bit of a buzzword, but I'll show you what that means. Now, this is an image of the software lifecycle process. And basically, traditionally, you might have done a lot of coding work, and then at the end, you have this chunk of work that you want to release, but it first needs to be reviewed by security, and so security reviews it before it goes out. But if security finds a bunch of problems, at that point, it might be difficult to actually go make those changes, right? Because you're already kind of locked in, and doing so could require a major refactor, you know, problems just in a large chunk of your code, things like that. So it's kind of problematic to think of security only at the end of the process. So what Snyk tries to do is to include it throughout the process. So taking it from the end, shifting it left all the way toward the beginning, and having points of contact throughout this software lifecycle, where you could have what I might call a security intervention, right? So if you're writing code and you're developing locally on your machine, you can use our CLI to run a scan, and we can let you know right then what problems are in your dependencies. And you could address it right then, where you probably aren't very locked in to what you're doing. It wouldn't require a really large refactor, right? Because you're catching it early. And so we want to help you catch things early and also catch things before they go out. So as early as possible, but we want multiple points throughout the process where you could find and fix these vulnerabilities. So where things come in with CodeShip is on the CI/CD section. And we're going to demonstrate a build and how Snyk can integrate into that. But the reason we call it continuous security is because we have these multiple points, right? Just like continuous integration, continuous delivery, you're working with really small increments of work. So you're doing many releases, you know, very frequently, as opposed to a large chunk of work, you know, very late. Just like that, we want to consider security on this like small level, in these really small chunks, so it's manageable, and so you can actually do something about it, right? Have an intervention right away. So let's see what that looks like with Snyk and CodeShip. So I'm going to navigate away from these slides, and I'm going to pull up some websites to give you an idea of what we're doing. Now, this is my GitHub, and I have forked a Snyk project that is a to-do app. And very cleverly, we built this app to purposely have a lot of problems. So we use this to show how exploits happen. We show this so you can see our product capturing vulnerabilities and that kind of thing. So this is going to purposefully fail. And so this is the repository that we're working from. And then I'm going to go over to CodeShip. And you can see I have already started a project on CodeShip that is connected to this GitHub repository, right? And currently it has no builds. Now, previous to this webinar, I went to my account on Snyk and I grabbed my API token. After that, I went to my CodeShip account, and for this project, I'm going to go to the project settings, and there is this environment tab. And so I clicked on this environment tab and I added my API token to the environment with the name Snyk token. Okay. And I'm going to show you how we can set up the commands and the tests to run, and it'll run a Snyk test. It'll be awesome. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select Node.js to pre-populate basic commands. And here in the setup commands, I'm going to do npm install. And then I want to do this globally. And I'm going to install Snyk. Also, I am going to add a pipeline, which I'm going to call Snyk. Joe, do you know why this isn't?
Let's try, yeah, go ahead and save it and then come back.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened there either. Let's see, it might be there. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, perfect. So now I have this Snyk test pipeline. And all I need to do is to type Snyk off, which is the command that is going to basically connect to my Snyk account. And I'm going to have to pass it my token. So I'm passing my environment variable Snyk token. And then it's very easy, once you're authenticated, to run a test. So that's going to be my second command in this pipeline. And I'm going to save this and go to the dashboard. And the test settings are saved. So now I'm going to go back to my GitHub and make a change, which will trigger a build, right? So I'm just going to make a quick change to my README file. This is just arbitrary, but it'll trigger things. So I'm just going to say, thanks CodeShip for having me on the webinar. So that's my change. That's all that it's going to involve. I will commit this change, and I'm committing directly to master, but it's going to be fine. It's just that text. So now I have a change and the build has started. Now we can click in to see what's going on at this moment. And so it's just going through some of the steps. And we'll watch it run and see what happens. Now, something that surprised me, but I really like this about CodeShip is that CodeShip actually, they're fairly security minded. It is warning me that there are problems, right? And it's saying that there are these security issues, things going on, and this is great. The Snyk step will give us a little bit more information, but generally speaking, this is I was really happy to see this in your product. So it's continuing to run. Now it's installing Snyk. Then it authorized me, and now we're running the Snyk test. And you can see here that it turned red, and that's because this purposefully vulnerability-ridden app, it showed up problems when it was checked against our database. So it's really great is that here we have a low severity vulnerability, and you can see it in blue. And there are a few of these, but there's also some more concerning ones that we'll see in this yellow, and even a few that are going to be shown. Yeah, there's a lot of these. There are a few that are going to be shown in red, which are high severity vulnerabilities. And our tool breaks this down for you, gives you a description. It gives you a URL that you can visit. And it will also tell you things like where the vulnerability was introduced through. It gives you remediation advice. So for this one, we want to upgrade direct dependency body parser version 1.9.0 to body parser 1.17.1. And so that's really great. I'm going to show you what the page looks like. So this is our vulnerability database. And for this particular vulnerability, you're going to see the CVSS score. We're calling this a high severity. We see some attack vectors and attack complexity, this kind of information, which gives you a general sense of it. But we have some more information, including Snyk patches that are available for different versions that you might use. We have some references like the GitHub commit where we can see kind of where this vulnerability originated, where it was fixed. You can go directly into the code, see what happened. We have a timeline, and so I think this is important to look at because you can see that February 13th, the issue was reported to the package owner and it was acknowledged. Just a few days later, February 16th, a partial fix was released. And on March 6th, 2017, a final fix was released to these versions here. And so if you find this vulnerability in your code, that means that more than 2 years have gone by since a fix was available, but that you're not taking advantage of it. So I think that illustrates what we're trying to do, which is to close that gap, right? I would much rather see an issue that is a couple months old, or month old, a week old, whatever, than one that's been out for 2 years, right? And so there's just a lot of information here that you can learn all about this vulnerability. And this is available for every problem that it found. So yeah, so this is how you can run Snyk as part of your test pipeline, part of your build, and it's a great way to get an idea of how many vulnerabilities you might be open to. If you push this out, it gives you a good sense of what's in your code and what you can do to fix it. And Snyk is free to try, right? I showed you my account. I have a number of things up just because I scan vulnerable projects all the time to demonstrate them to you. But we have this free tier where you can use our products. You can connect to your source control manager. You can download our CLI tool, and you can find all of that at app.snyk.io and try it for yourself. Unfortunately, I showed you the account setting where I have this API token that I needed to put in my environment in CodeShip. This is a paid part of our product, but if you are a big fan of CodeShip, which I think is probably fairly likely because you're here, you know, try Snyk, try the free version, and if you like us too, then that is it's probably worth it to upgrade to where you could use this integration. So that's what I would encourage you to try. Try our free version, and if you like it, it's really easy. It took about you know, just a few minutes to be able to run the scan on CodeShip. So that is what I wanted to show you, and I'm going to go back to the slides, and we'll do just a really quick wrap up, and then we can do some questions. And yeah, so one moment. All right. So just to review and to wrap up, I wanted to reiterate that Snyk is going to help you find and fix vulnerabilities in your open source dependencies. And we saw that in action, so that's cool. And we've built tools throughout the CI/CD pipeline. This integration with CodeShip is one of those tools and one of the points of contact with the software development lifecycle, the CI/CD process. But you can think about security from the very beginning, and I really encourage you to try to do so. So we just are really happy to partner with CodeShip because we love to meet you where you are and with the tools that you use. So thanks again to CodeShip for partnering with us and for having me here today, because it was really fun to demo this for you. And another plug just for the DevOps World, Jenkins World Conference. I'm really excited about this. It should be really, really cool. And we have some more Snyk associated content that is going to be at the conference in August at San Francisco. My boss will be demoing some things, and if this has caught your interest, I encourage you to go see his talk. His name's Simon Maple. And yeah, and then the conference in December as well should be really great. And again, this is the URL that you can go to sign up for an account and to try our product. And I just want to say thank you. It means a lot to me that people take time out of their day to learn something new about security. We would love to hear from you on Twitter. Snyk, our Twitter handle is SnyKSec, I spelled that wrong, SNYK, Sec, S-E-C. And my Twitter handle is Haley Denby. And we would love to hear from you on either account. And our website again is www.snyk.io. So I think that we're going to kick it back to Joe or to Max and to just have a little bit of discussion. So.
All right, we can move on to questions. Before we do, Joe, is there anything you want to say?
I think I'm good. Yeah, ready for some questions.
All right, we do have a few here. Before I start asking the more technical ones, I'd like to let everyone who's been asking know, yes, we have been recording this. I know some people had to come on a bit late. You'll be able to get that recording in the next few days. So I'm going to kind of go through these here and there. So I like this one. Do you only check source code of open source open source projects, or can you check compiled versions like things in Red Hat, OpenShift, Nginx, etc.?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so we do have some partnerships with, for instance, like OpenShift. We have a partnership that's going on. But the answer to that question might surprise you, and I will show you why. So let me take you to my my Snyk account. And so I have these different projects, right? And I'm going to show you, like, this is one of the first code things I wrote several years ago, right? And it's just like it's just a for fun project, right? And what Snyk did was that it ingested my manifest file, right? So for this particular project, that was a requirements.txt file for this Python project of mine, right? And so it ingested the requirements.txt, and it was able to build a dependency tree that you can see here. And what this shows is it shows my direct dependencies, which are these three here: SQL Alchemy, Flask, and requests. But Flask has some indirect dependencies, including Jinja 2 and this one here. So once Snyk has ingested your manifest file, it knows the versions you're using and what projects you're using, and we check that against our vulnerability database. So the vulnerability database, which has some of it is available for you to just browse if you're curious. It has information from public sources. So like this would be like the National Vulnerability Database, but there's a couple of others as well. So this has info from public sources, and then it has more information from our private team of security researchers. And what these people do is they add value to the public information. So they may help clarify what the problem is. They can weed out false positives to a degree and just give you more context about the issue. And then that team also finds new vulnerabilities that we then disclose, but they're known first through, or they're published first through us. And so the reason I mention this is that we're not necessarily scanning, or when you run a scan on Snyk, when you type Snyk test, scan probably isn't the best word. What it's doing is it's ingesting your manifest file, building your dependency tree, and then checking all of those dependencies against our database, which includes public data and proprietary data. So it doesn't actually like, it doesn't scan through the open source dependency. It's just that you're checking a specific version against disclosure work that has already been done either by ourselves or by others. So I hope that cleared that up. But if you have a follow-up question or something, feel free to reach out on Twitter or through the chat.
All right, so another real quick disclaimer before we move on to the next question. We're getting a lot in and a lot of very good ones. We won't have time to get to every single one. We will make sure that everyone gets contacted after the fact. In the meantime, I did put the Snyk URL and the Twitter handles in the chat. If you want to reach out before then, please do. So this is a recent question, but I think this is a good one to go to next. So after Snyk finds a vulnerability, does the build fail or is it allowed to complete?
So the way I had set this up, the build fails. So if you look at this, have our nice red mark there, that kind of thing. But so this is going to fail the build. There are some settings within Snyk where you can tell it to ignore certain things, that kind of thing. But yes, the default is to fail the build.
All right. Which one do we want to go to next? On the coding side, does this mean that there is a fat client install needed on the desktop or laptops of developers?
So there are a few different things that you can do. Our CLI is it's fairly lightweight because if we go back to, let me show you. I'm going to go to the project settings and these tests, right? So this actually shows you something very, very similar to what happens in the CLI, which is you need to install Snyk with this command here, npm install globally and then Snyk. But once you do that, you're able to, the first time that you use it, you're going to need this command Snyk off. And I did this with an API token, right? The Snyk token here. But if you're on your local machine, running this will just bring up our website, and you'll be able to sign in and authenticate. And that, once you do that once, it creates a file where your machine will be trusted in the future, right? So the only reason we have to run this every time is because we're doing the setup commands and then these test commands, right? But if you're working from your local machine, you'll just have to authenticate once, and then you'll be able to run Snyk test. And running Snyk test is going to hit our vulnerability database. So like, you will need to be connected to the internet to do this. So you can't run Snyk test if you're on a plane with no Wi-Fi. But if you do have internet access, it's basically just getting information from our database. There isn't a ton installed locally. It's just the tools that it needs to talk to our information in the cloud, if that makes sense.
All right, let's get through a few more here. Can we use this for private repos?
I believe so. You definitely can on the paid account, and I think you can with the free account, though there is a quota per month that you're limited to. But yeah, anything that you can find. Let me go back. So if I want to add a project, I can do so through my GitHub or my CLI, and anything on GitHub can be added, even if it's, I don't think I have any, yeah, I've added them all, but yeah, you can add your own private repos, but like if it's a work repo, you might have to need the right permissions, that kind of thing. I would try it on a public repo first, just for fun. You can even, or something I've done on a few projects is I've forked other people's repos and then tried that. So it'll give you a sense of what we can find really easily. So yes, but I would start with a public repo first.
All right, still a lot of questions coming in, so just to reiterate to everyone, we'll make sure these all get answered. We're not gonna be able to get to every single one on the air here. So the next one for now is, are there language limits? Do you support Go, .NET, C#?
So I mentioned earlier that we try to meet people where they are, and that includes within the language ecosystems that they're in. So you get a little sense of the language ecosystems here with the logos. Our best supported ecosystem is currently Node, but we have our little Go gopher here, and I showed you a Python project. Additionally, we can look at the vulnerability database, and this will show you the different package managers that we work with. So for instance, you mentioned .NET. You can search for projects that are through NuGet. And so yeah, that's, we have a number of language ecosystems, and we're looking to add to it all the time. For instance, this past quarter, we released .NET support. So if there is a language that you like to use and you don't see it in these, shoot me a tweet or an email at haley@snyk.io, because I would love to hear what you would like to use Snyk for. A big part of my job is listening to the community, so I love to get feedback. If you don't see your preferred language, let me know.
All right, let's do this one now. What information is shared with Snyk when we run our tests in the pipeline? Are we sending our code base or only the list of dependencies? Anything else?
That is a great question, and one we see a number of times. And again, I'll go back to this. So this is my little first personal project I did a long time ago, and you can see the manifest is requirements.txt. So the only thing that Snyk looks at is this manifest file, and there's some capabilities that we have where you can indicate what this manifest file is. And so it ingests that, and it keeps track of your dependency tree, but we're not ingesting any of the code you've written or any of your files except this one manifest file. We also, if things like this are of a concern to you, we have on-prem solutions for people looking for that kind of service. So.
All right, there's so many more I wish we could get to. I think we really have time for one more. Before I ask this, I just want to let everyone know that as I close this out at the end, a very short survey will pop up, just 4 questions. What did you think, and what would you like to learn more about in the future? That kind of thing. So I think this is a good one to end with. We talked about it in the poll at the beginning. We've talked about it throughout the session. So Haley, with Snyk, how often do you update the database vulnerabilities?
I mean, how often are we adding to our vulnerability DB?
That is how I interpret the question, yes.
Okay. Well, we have a team of people where that is their entire job, is to both find new vulnerabilities and to add helpful information to the public data. They do some of this manually. We have some tools that can scan GitHub and other, or GitHub, GitLab, etc., looking for keywords and issues and things like that. So it's an ongoing process for us. And you know, as far as like our own code goes, I work mostly on demos. So, you know, my projects will be vulnerability laden by design, but I know our team really tries to practice what we preach, or as far as our development team goes as well. So we use our tool and keep things up to date too. It's a priority, and it's something we want to help others do. And I'm just very happy that there are people out there who are interested in doing so.
All right, thank you very much. We're just over the top of the hour, so we do need to stop now to be mindful of everyone's time. Before I pull up that survey and end this for everyone, Haley or Joe, is there anything you'd like to say as parting words?
No, just thank you again for having me. It was really fun, and I hope the listeners learned something, and I would love any feedback that people have. So thank you all for coming.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll talk to you real soon. Here comes that survey, and we'll talk to you again.